Hello, I'm David Lucas, and today we're talking about our theme in Module 2, Prejudice Beyond Skin Color. Now that title might puzzle you a little bit, so I want to try to explain what we're talking about here. We know, and that's sort of the benchmark, we know that people are prejudiced against others because of skin color, also because of heritage and background. We know this is true. But I don't know if you've thought about that people that are able-bodied are often prejudiced against persons with disabilities. Let me give you some examples of how this is seated in our rhetoric. It's enfolded in the way we talk about people with disabilities, or at least the way we've talked about them until now. Consider the word afflicted, for example. That's a negative term that gives a hopelessness. He's afflicted. Avoid that term. That's prejudicial. We've already talked about confined to a wheelchair, as if the person is imprisoned. Wheelchairs are not imprisoning people, as we've already said. They're liberated with these mobility devices. Crippled. Avoid that term. It implies that the person is pitiful and can't do anything. Oh, don't use the terms or phrases deaf and dumb. Those are antiquated and very prejudicial. And never use the term deaf-mute. Those terms are outdated, and now they react, people with disabilities react to them, and they feel bad about them because they're very prejudicial. Talk about people who are hard of hearing, or people who can't speak, or people who can't hear. Those are more accurate and more real, and not labeling them. Never use the term gimp. I've heard that term, and it's very prejudicial. Notice, these are terms like we've tossed around, and they're very hurtful. This is used in terms with people who have either a missing limb or who are lame in one limb. With all of our soldiers who are coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq who've been wounded in defense of the country, that certainly would not be a good term to use. Don't use the word poor in relationship with someone with a disability. Oh, that poor person. It's as if they can't earn a living. It's as if they can't do anything about who they are. Never use the term retard or retarded. I even hesitate to bring this up because it just goes right through me, but you'll hear young people say this, and try to pull them aside and say, may I help you with something? You need to understand that these are very unacceptable terms, and certain disabilities may make people seem awkward or maybe not as able in their communication as those of us who are taking this course, for example, and yet it doesn't mean that a person doesn't have intellectual ability or capabilities, so be careful with that. Never use the term spastic. I haven't heard that term in a long time, but I remember as a young man hearing it, and just because someone has nervous reactions or some sort of physical or neurological impairment doesn't mean that they can't motivate or navigate. Avoid using the term suffering with people with disabilities. Many of them are excelling, and they have capabilities and are succeeding in life, so avoid that term. If they use the term, allow them to do that as a self-descriptor, but avoid using that term. It's very prejudicial. And again, a label like unfortunate. Oh, that poor unfortunate man. Those kinds of descriptors or those kinds of labels often cause the people very, very much difficulty. And finally, victim. Now, sometimes people will describe themselves as a victim, but persons afflicted by an uncontrollable force or afflicted by an accident, they don't want to be considered a victim. They're people with disabilities, not helpless victims. These are terms that we need to think about as we consider all of this idea in Module 2 about being prejudiced against people with disabilities. Let's drop these prejudices. Let's do some introspection. Let's do some reflection. Get on that blog and tell us all what you think and what you're learning, and keep communicating, and do it carefully with these people with disabilities.